and the French for control of North America. There's a new case for the #1 ladies detective agency on BBC Radio 4 Extra next week. Botswana's first ever female detective, Mara Motswe, finds herself dipping a toe into the murky world of local politics, while the agency investigates the unfair dismissal of a woman called Charity from a firm selling office furniture.
As a matter of interest, what did he say you said to him?
He said that I shouted at him that if he didn't like any of our desks, then he could go and build one himself. But I would never have said that, Ma. Never.
I am sure you wouldn't have. Tell me, Ma, do you have any enemies? Anybody who may really dislike you?
None that I know of. There is one person who dislikes me.
What is the real reason for Charity's dismissal? Alexander McCall-Smith's The #1 Ladies Detective Agency begins on Radio 4 Extra and BBC Sounds next Monday morning at 10 and again at 3.
This is BBC Radio 4 Extra.
11 o'clock, hello, Jim Lee here, about to bring you the Friedland Files, in which Michael Friedland shares private recordings revealing some of the lesser-known stories of some of the great stars of stage and screen. Jim Caddy, Morgan Wise, Fred Astaire and James Stewart among them. And later here on 4 Extra, John MacDonald explores the strange backstory to the infamous 1975 Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier fight, the thriller in Manila, at 2:30.
Before I had a chance to travel to Egypt to meet him in person, he died. In this episode, we're using recordings from interviews he did with the BBC 20 years ago. Over the phone, Esawi told me that the next time he had contact with Salman Rushdie was 18 months later, in September 1990, after he saw the author being interviewed on the South Bank show.
It's been hell. And there are great losses in Italy, for example. The thing that has always been of central importance in my writing is the city of Bombay. And God knows when I'll ever be able to go there again.
I mean, this man claims to be an atheist. And now he's saying, God knows when will I walk the streets of Bombay again. What's an atheist man talking about that for?
By this time, the fatwa had been issued, and Rushdie was in hiding, so Esawi called Milton Bragg, the presenter of the South Bank show, to pass a message to the author, wanting him to get in touch, and they began a relationship over the phone.
And he would phone me almost every night for a pretty long time. I can't believe it.
That's El Esawi's wife, and she remembers a story he recounted to me too, about how one night she'd been cutting his toenail.
Oh, this toenail thing, yes. I was a carpenter. Even if I hadn't been, I think I'd possibly have cut Hisham's toenails. He had difficulty reaching his toenails. And one time at home, I was already cutting his nails and Salman called him. We were chatting, and I think I was a little bit harsh, and Hisham squeaked.
What was that? Asked Salman. Oh, it's just my wife cutting my toenails, Esawi replied.
And Salman laughed, and he said, oh, my wives have never offered to cut my toenails. And it was just a light-hearted exchange. It really didn't mean very much.
Rushdie later recalled this incident in his autobiography, where he writes in the third person.
That became the image of the dentist that stuck in his mind. A man making phone calls as a woman knelt at his feet.
And so Rushdie and Esawi got to know each other pretty well, but I'm not sure they were exactly close. I asked Esawi if he liked Rushdie. He paused for a long time and said, I think even Salman's family struggled to like him.
But after months of calls, the two men finally arranged a meeting. Almost immediately, they got into a heated theological debate, in which Esawi said to him,
You really are arguing with these people, but you're not one of them. You're not on the same plane, because you don't have anything in common. You're not a Muslim. He said, yes, I am.
After that, Esawi became convinced Rushdie's faith was repressed, buried somewhere deep inside him. The author had grown up in a very liberal Muslim household. This is how his sister Samin describes it.
I think the extent of Salman's religious upbringing would have been once a year he was taken to the mosque on Eid. I suppose in quotes to pray, but when he asked what he should do, and he was told that when they go down, you go down, when they get up, you get up.
But Rushdie always said he had a nagging God-shaped hole where his faith had once been. That was what the dentist seized upon, and he was pretty persuasive. Here's how Rushdie remembered it in his biography.
Every time he called Esoui, he was aware of being lured further and further into a space from which he would find it difficult to withdraw. Yet he continued to call, and Esoui allowed him to take his time slowly, at his own speed, with many retreats and evasions, to where the hook waited for his willing mouth.
On Christmas Eve that year, Special Branch escorted Salman Rushdie into a room in the basement of Paddington Green Police Station, perhaps the most secure facility in the UK. Sitting behind a long table were 6 Muslim clerics, including 2 from Esoui's mosque in Regent's Park. He'd even invited an Egyptian minister. There, Rushdie entered into an agreement. He would reaffirm his faith, publicly state that he didn't agree with the insulting comments spoken by the characters in his book, and promised not to allow Penguin to release a paperback of the Satanic Verses. In return, Esoui, with the help of the other men in the room, would try to persuade the Muslim world to forgive him. The next day, Hisham el-Esoui hosted a very strange press conference. He sat alone at a table facing a large crowd of journalists. In front of him was a blue phone.
Yes, hello. Well, we just started. You're on time. Well, this is Rushdie on the phone.
May I wish to say that this is the community which is closest to my heart, and for me to come closer to it is, for me, a great source of joy. And I was happy.
Later that day, Rushdie spoke to the BBC.
I have no quarrel with the central tenets of Islam, which is the oneness of God and the validity of the prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad.
So you're a believer?
I am able to accept the central principle of Islam.
So that effectively you are a Muslim?
So that effectively, yes, I would now be prepared to say that.
I don't think any of us really believed it. Everyone thought, oh, we're just going to try that now to get out of it.
Rushdie hadn't told anyone about his plans to reaffirm his faith. And so his friend, Hanif Qureshi, heard the news over the radio like everyone else.
No, I didn't think he was sincere about it. I didn't think sincerity was important at all. Why would you want to be sincere? You just say what you need to say and hope that these bearded ones will bugger off.
I remember Hisham being overjoyed.
This is Elaine, Hisham el-Esoui's wife.
He came to tell us that Salman Rushdie is now a Muslim. And I was happy. Hisham was delighted. I was sceptical.
Close friend Bill Buford was hosting Rushdie over Christmas.
That was a complicated day. He was in a bad moment, I would say. I think it was a moment of loneliness and doubt and exhaustion.
Years later, Rushdie recorded a diary entry he made a week after he reaffirmed his faith.
Ever since I made my compromise with the Muslim scholars on Christmas Eve, I've been feeling sick. Sick at heart and in my stomach. This isn't me. It isn't me. I speak to my sister. She says, what have you done? Have you gone mad?
Salman Rushdie didn't get the reaction he hoped for from the Muslim world. Most people who were hostile towards him when he was an atheist remained hostile even after he said he was a Muslim. And within weeks, Rushdie was backtracking. At that point, he turned on the dentist, saying he'd manipulated him when he was at his lowest ebb. He called Esoui the kind of Muslim who forces his wife to sit at his feet, cutting his toenails.
He made his break with the dentist and left those well-manicured toenails behind forever.
Now Rushdie turned his attention to the paperback edition of the Satanic Verses. But Penguin, his publisher, was reluctant to publish it, in case they stirred things up again. In the end, the head of Penguin, Peter Mayer, called a meeting of senior staff to decide what to do.
We took a vote and it divided entirely equally. As it were, 13 votes in favour of publication, 13 against.
James was a Penguin employee at the time. We're not using his real name because he remains a target of the fatwa himself. He remembers people making persuasive arguments both for and against publishing the paperback edition.
And we had a break. We went back, there was more discussions. We took another vote. One person had changed her mind and she voted for publication this time. This decision was taken, and the idea was that we would publish very, very quickly. I went to bed and was awoken at some point early in the morning by a piece of mail who was flying back to New York to say, having heard the news, there was a Penguin book store within Liberties, and somebody had thrown a small incendiary device over it. And he said to me, I can't do it. I can't take the responsibility of other people's lives for a book.
His fear would turn out to be well-founded.
Next time on Fatwa. It's going to take more than 5 minutes, he said. They're trying to kill me. Episode 9. I've got a problem here.
It's a miracle that he survived. I think it was a shocking picture of a new time, of a new world.
Fatwa was produced by Chloe Hatch-Matheo. Originally broadcast in 2019, you can listen to the series from the beginning on BBC Sounds. As we'll hear shortly in the news, Britain's third woman Prime Minister is just getting her feet under the desk at number 10. What sort of leader will she be? Well, that's a question for Woman's Hour, coming up in a couple of minutes.
As the curtain begins to fall on another year at the BBC Proms, we live an incredible summer of live music with BBC Sounds. Recapture every moment of tension, vitality, and joy as we embark on our final adventure. And you're invited. The last night of the Proms on Saturday night at 7:15 on BBC Sounds.
BBC Radio 4. BBC News at 10 o'clock. Liz Truss has chaired her first cabinet meeting since becoming Prime Minister. She's made tackling rising energy bills a top priority. It's understood that a typical household's annual gas and electricity bill could be capped at around £2,500. The precise details of any support for businesses has yet to be confirmed. Paul Johnson, the director of the Institute of Fiscal Studies, says a blanket approach is wrong.
The majority of the money will go to better off people who use more energy, so this is very poorly targeted, and not only is it poorly targeted, it also means that we don't see, and including better off people, don't see the full price signal that actually across the world people need to see. I mean, the reason that gas prices are so high is because there's less gas around, and then if the world doesn't use less gas over the next year, then we're going to run out.
Around the cabinet table were some of Miss Truss's closest allies, including Kwasi Kwarteng, who's become the Chancellor, and Therese Coffey, who's the new Health Secretary. But the Prime Minister is already facing questions from some Tory MPs about the widespread promotion of loyalists. 4 men arrested in connection with the murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel have been given conditional bail. Police in Liverpool say they still need to build up a strong evidential picture. President Putin has warned that Russia could try to limit the countries that can receive grain shipments from Ukraine. He claimed most of the ships that have left the country under a UN deal have been travelling to developed countries. Kiev says it does not see any reason to amend the agreement. The FBI reportedly found documents containing information about a foreign power's nuclear and defence capabilities when it searched President Trump's house. The Washington Post says a total of 11,000 items were seized during last month's raid. Scientists studying wild chimpanzees in Uganda have found that each animal has their own signature drumming style. The chimps use tree roots to hammer out messages to each other over long distances. BBC News.
BBC Radio 4. It's time for Woman's Hour with Emma Barnett.
Good morning and welcome to the programme. The country is now being run by not one, but 2 women. Liz Truss as Prime Minister and her great pal and political colleague, Theresa Coffey, as Deputy Prime Minister, also the new Health Secretary. As the 4th since last year of June, we have had 4 Health Secretaries, and also looking at the number of Prime Ministers shortly and what they're going to be offering, says we'll come to my guests. But Theresa Coffey spoke to my colleagues on the Today programme earlier today, and this is what she had to say.
We know this is a challenge. What I've seen from the Prime Minister is actually how excited and focused she is to deliver. And that's why I've supported Liz for many reasons, not just because she's my friend, far from it. It's because I think she's the person who can get on, get the grip, and make sure that we deliver for the people of this country.
Well, some have talked about an old girls' club replacing the old boys' club. Others care little for the personnel or for the fact that for the first time none of the highest offices of state are held by a white man. The hunger, instead, is to know what the Prime Minister will do with her new power. Prime Minister Truss has met her new cabinet this morning, and dominating the conversation like COVID and Brexit before it is one topic: energy prices. Tomorrow we will have more of an idea of what her plan is in this regard, but first at 12 today she'll be at the dispatch box in the House of Commons for her first Prime Minister's questions, across from Sir Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party. Where are you at this morning? Excitement in your house about a new Prime Minister, a new chapter, benefit of the doubt being given? You could have, of course, voted for her if you're a member of the Conservative Party, or would have done if you were given the chance. Or do you feel more along the lines of the Daily Mirror newspaper headline writers this morning? After 12 years of Conservative rule, beleaguered and impatient for Liz Truss to fix the Britain her party and the 3 previous Conservative Prime Ministers, as they put it, broke. Well, you can text me here at the programme. The number is 84844. Text will be charged your standard message rate. On social media, at BBC Woman's Hour. Email me through the Woman's Hour website. Or go on, try sending me a voice note on WhatsApp or a message through WhatsApp on 03700 100 444. You may wish to use Wi-Fi because data charges can apply. Also on today's programme, we'll be hearing how it is to leave a strict religious community in this country and survive life on the outside. One woman tells all very bravely too. The untold stories of haggitude, hags with attitude, a psychologist and author on how to become an elder, not elderly, and the female entrepreneur who came to this country as a refugee from Afghanistan as a child, who just can't seem to stop winning awards. All that to come. But first, a new Prime Minister, the 3rd female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is installed in Britain's most famous London cul-de-sac. Liz Truss, of course the former Foreign Secretary and Women and Equalities Minister, today has her first full day in number 10. We asked to speak to the new Prime Minister this morning, but as I mentioned, it is a busy day. Last time I spoke to Liz Truss, it was actually after the release of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe from imprisonment in Iran, and during that exchange on this programme, I asked her this. Perhaps I could ask you to commit, with a time when it isn't as frantic, to come and do a phone-in here with the listeners of Woman's Hour on what women would like, because they do have a lot of questions for you that we aren't able to get through today. I'd like to do that, Emma. Thank you very much. I'll take that as a yes when your diary is freer. Well, the invite is still open. We would love for her to come, especially now she's Prime Minister. But of course, we're also waiting to hear who will be the new Women and Equalities Minister. Some of those junior positions not yet appointed, or maybe they have been. As I'm talking, Camilla Tominey, a woman in the know, Associate Editor at the Daily Telegraph. Have we missed a lot in the last 5 minutes? Things are moving.
My phone here, Emma, to see if there's any more ministerial appointments, and I can't see. As you know, though, the Wi-Fi is notoriously bad in the Millbank, the BBC studio, so I haven't got anything through yet.
That's our Westminster bit. People don't know Millbank. How's she doing so far? Are you feeling inspired at the Daily Telegraph? Are you all pumped up?
Well, we've done quite a pumped up front page, and actually I think it was a pretty solid performance yesterday. It wasn't going to start winning any awards for oratory, but then maybe people are actually quite welcoming of somebody who's a complete break from Boris Johnson. We had him being quite boosterish in the morning and almost pretending like Britain didn't have any problems, and then Liz Truss emerging in the afternoon, basically setting out an agenda to deal with what is the biggest and most sort of troublesome in-tray that a Prime Minister has seen since the 1970s. So maybe it's not the time for sort of joking and clowning around, and a degree of seriousness is needed.
She does make a lot of, in fact, I think we put together a bit of a montage of her saying this, that she gets the job done. That seems to be what she, and then we heard her friend Therese Coffey this morning saying very similarly.
Yes, and she's all about delivery, right? So some comparisons have been made to Deliveroo. And obviously she's already a hate figure among the Twitterati, but that was always going to be the case. The interesting thing about Truss, I think, is she cares less what people think of her than Boris Johnson ever did. She's not necessarily a pleaser. I think the idea is for her maybe not to be liked by swathes of the country, but like Thatcher, to at least be respected for having an ideological vision and also a clarity of purpose when it comes to policy making. I mean, this idea of expediting what we think is going to be a cap on energy bills at £2,500, probably announcing that tomorrow rather than next week, shows that she understands that there's urgency needed, not least because we're 2 years out from another general election, and let's face it, the Tories are behind in the polls.
Is it true that she's good at delivery? I mean, I'm thinking back, she's had a lot of roles in short succession, especially if you look at international trade, which interestingly has gone to Kemi Badenoch, the other woman who was doing extremely well in that race and was potentially going to go to the final two at one point. There was and has been criticism that much of what she talked about and posted many photos of doing on Instagram and travelling the world, many of them were rollover deals. There were deals that were already in place, and the achievement was not much to boast about.
Well, I think she'd argue the opposite, that she
would. I've had that argument with her. But I'm asking politically, is her record as good as she's saying, I get the job done? When you look across, how was she received by those in the legal field when she was Lord Chancellor?
Well, I think her argument will be that she is one of the most experienced politicians in top senior ranks today, and therefore she has got that pedigree. To be fair, she often talks about this idea that the levers of power in government just don't operate quickly enough, that everything takes an eternity to get done. So I do also, there was a degree, wasn't there, I think, of indecision. I remember one cabinet minister talking about meetings with Boris Johnson where he displayed something called a sort of strange silence, where he'd go around the room, ask people for their opinion, and then everyone would go, right, what's going to be decided? And nothing ever was. I can't see Truss operating in that way. Obviously, we've seen this image of cabinet meeting for the first time this morning. The idea about her surrounded by loyalists perhaps seems a bit continuity. That was the criticism of Johnson, that he had too many yes men and women there. But then I also ask myself the question, who would you be surrounding yourself with? Your enemies?
No, of course, and that's what you do. You have your allies. It's just whether they're people who answer back to you. That's always the concern, and don't just, well, if there are decisions being made, as you're saying, perhaps there weren't before in quite the way people were hoping, will they challenge them enough? We have mentioned Therese Coffey. The idea, you've written about this, you've looked into their bond, the idea of them being political soulmates. What does that mean?
She took out the brooch her brother had given her, and there at the pigeon blood rubies.
A week later, she placed the brooch and the letter in an envelope for her Turkish husband and her Turkish son. And she left with her brother for San Francisco.
The son she left behind.
You wish to know his name? Levant Kazanci, your father.
My father.
Your father, forever embittered by the mother who abandoned him. And where is that brooch now, master? The pomegranate brooch.
You know full well.
You see, master, you are also part Armenian. Your whole family is... Is that not funny? Master, your gentle grandfather who married the Armenian child, Shusha, who abandoned him and their Turkish son, your father, and then left for San Francisco to start a new family, an Armenian family, and whose granddaughter, Armanoush, sleeps right now in this very house, whilst her American mother flies through the air with her husband Mustafa, your brother, who brings the truth to this house. The truth. What will you do about that, master?
But Auntie Banu was now holding her talisman and uttering holy words from the Quran. And this finally silenced Mr. Bitterheart.
Honey, is Turkish food spicy?
Well, awesome.
I picked up some Texan spicy sauce, in case the food sucks.
My family's food.
No, the food on the plane.
Right.
Oh, thank you. Wow, it's so great all the drinks are free. I guess I wasn't sure there'd be any, on the flight, with it being a Turkish airline and all. Are you okay, sweetie? You look a little bit peaky.
I'm fine. All good.
Looking forward to seeing your folks.
Sure.
The light was still on in Zaliha's room, my master's youngest and most favorite of sisters. She was asleep, slumped across her bed, with an empty vodka bottle on the floor. My master hid the bottle under the bed, and then smoothed over the sheet, tucking her sister in. She opened the window to let in the sea wind and looked at us, her chin, watching as ever from her shoulders. And Auntie Banu bent down and kissed her beautiful sister's forehead, whispered words of protection over her as she slept, and left the room, taking us, her chin, with her. Streets of Istanbul and down to the cafe she frequented.
Your favorite cafe? Yeah. Where I'll meet all your friends. Yes. You weren't gonna take me, were you? I was. Well, I think I was.
I can't believe you didn't tell your parents you were coming to Istanbul.
No. Well, they would have stopped me from coming.
So you lied. That is so cool. Cigarette?
No, thanks. I still don't smoke.
You should try it.
I can't help feeling that there's something that's not right. There's something my mom's not telling me.
But she seemed okay when you spoke to her.
Well, that's it. She was too okay. I take off to Istanbul without telling her. And though she's relieved to find me, she wasn't angry or anything. It doesn't make sense. My mom doesn't travel anywhere. She barely goes out of Arizona.
The cafe's just down there. So shall I introduce you as Amy or Armanouche?
I don't mind. Should I be Armenian or American? You choose. You know your friends.
They won't mind. They're poets and writers and a cartoonist. Mine.
You what?
Well, you still look peaky. Are you sure you're just tired, honey?
Yes.
You gonna get some shut-eye?
You should try to get some sleep too.
I think I might. Oh, if you got those eye patches there, would you pass them to me, please? Oh, it's so cute. It's all in a package. Look, there's a little toothbrush and toothpaste. They're so dinky.
Rose settled, placing the eye mask over her eyes, plunging herself into darkness, and Mustafa looked around the cabin. There was a woman standing in the aisle, leaning over a fellow passenger, talking. She was Turkish and wearing a short skirt. Mustafa Kazanca looked away, squeezing his wife's hand as he did so. But she was already asleep.
Amy. You can call me Amy.
Amy. That's a sweet name.
Say the talentless poet.
Thank you.
Otherwise, Amy.
No, thanks. I'm fine with my coffee.
So sweet. It's not her real name.
Why are you smiling, Asya? I know that smile.
Say the political cartoonist.
And Armanouche. Armanouche Chakmakchian.
Armanouche Chakmakchian, huh?
That's an Armenian name.
And all eyes turn to Armanouche.
I'm Armenian.
They were Istanbulites, her family. They were made from gold paint in 1980. For many died from the nation. Great grand.
was a writer. You know, the intellectuals were killed first, obviously.
It was then that the scriptwriter known for the ultra-patriotic TV series Timur.
That didn't happen, you know?
Oh, really?
Look, I'm very sorry for your family, Amy or Armanush.
Thank you.
But you have to understand, it was a time of war. People died on both sides. Do you have any idea how many Turks died at the hands of the Armenian rebels? How about the suffering of the Turkish families? You need to understand that 1915 is not now. Times were different back then. There was no Turkish state then. It was the Ottoman Empire.
Okay. I thought you weren't a nationalist.
Yeah, you're always saying you only write that series because the money's good.
I'm not a nationalist, but I do respect historical truths. People have been brainwashed.
Maybe you have been brainwashed.
Yeah. What do you know about 1950?
I believe with my job. An exaggeration and distortion. I mean, come on. Something with money, 2 million? Who in the right mind would take it?
You see, so American children swear allegiance to their flag every day, and your friend comes here. That's not what I've done.
She's not attacking us.
And saying what you want. Then open up this fight.
Hysteria.
What does that mean? What the hell does that mean?
Collective hysteria. Driven by a few individuals. I mean, if you hear a story over and over enough times, you come to believe it, don't you?
Hysteria is that nationalist tribal man, Timur the Lionheart, the muscular Turk running from one ridiculous adventure to another to fight the evil Byzantine. You make millions of people into idiotic nationalist. Not collective.
You know I want.
But that's the thing. You do is even worse. Because you don't even believe in it. Hypocrite.
Who do you think you are to talk to me about hypocrisy? Little Miss Bastard.
What?
What did you call her?
A bastard. Because that's what she is.
Say that again.
Bastard. Your little girlfriend here is a bastard.
Oh my god.
And that's when the fight broke out.
Hey, arkadaşlar bir dakika yavaş. Sakin ol. Lütfen.
My master was in the kitchen, making ashuri, as instructed by her mother, Gülsüm, adding the final ingredients to the simmering pot. Hazelnuts, pine nuts, golden raisins, dried figs, apricots, rose water, and
you want an
yes, I know. Ashuri, it was his favorite.
Yes, you said.
Expose of it. I had made them. Did well. I couldn't scold him. Greedy boy, I said. Greedy boy. From then on, I always made extra for him. Extra for my son. And now he's coming home. He's coming home. Where is Feride? Is she helping to prepare?
Yes,
Of course, mother. And Seliha, in her own way. Which means she's doing nothing. Why do you always protect her? I've booked a taxi. What for?
to collect them from the airport.
A taxi? You have to collect them, Seliha.
I'm not going.
But you're the only one who can drive.
That's why I ordered the taxi.
Taxi? We can't send the taxi. You know we can't, Seliha.
Right.
Cancel it. He's my son. We can't send the taxi. We have to go and greet him. Not like Germans who pack their mothers into homes and forget about them.
That's what Mustafa has done.
He's your brother. He's your blood.
That is true.
You have to
Driver, you have to go home. Are the girls back? They're in the other room.
Alright. Yes, 6?
Well,
It's a 6 again.
lucky. It's beginner's luck.
Your turn.
Do they often do that?
Do what? Fight? Never. It's a first. You must have brought it out in them.
A 3, you're winning.
I'm going to the airport to pick them up.
Can I come with you?
Yes, Marmaduke, of course.
And me?
No.
What?
I don't want you to come. I'm coming. No, you're not, miss.
Why not?
Someone has got to stay and help Auntie Barnum.
Why?
No! Asya, no.
But Auntie Celia,
No.
what have I done this time?
You've done nothing.
Unless it's my very existence that upsets you.
Whatever do you mean, Asya?
You heard.
You can't come, that's all.
Auntie.
No.
I'll stay here. We can help Banu together. Mom won't mind.
Right. Okay.
Well, there, I'm off.
Celia. Celia. Wait, Celia.
Why wouldn't she let you go?
I don't know. I never know with her. Here, help me stir the Ashuri, and I'll tell you a story. I should warn you, Auntie Bano loves her stories, because you can learn so much from a story. I would love to hear your story. No. There was once a man who decided to travel the globe round and round, never stopping, in the hope that he would escape death. North and south, east and west, he went every which way he could. And then, on one of his numerous trips, he unexpectedly ran with the angel. He was encouraged when he saw him, looking at him. Piercing expression. The man abandoned Cairo right away, traveling non-stop till he had arrived in a small, sleepy town in northern China. Now thirsty and tired, he rushed into the first tavern he could find, and there, in a corner of the bar, sat Azrael, patiently waiting for him. And he had a relieved expression on his face. I was so surprised to run into you in Cairo, he rasped to the man, for your destiny said that it was here in China that we two would meet.
Oh my god.
What is it?
Why didn't I see this before?
What?
I couldn't understand how they knew that I wasn't with either of them. My father hadn't spoken to my mother for years. I thought that something had happened to my mom, but of course it must be my father. That must be how she found out. It must be. What time is it?
Call them.
Yeah. Can I call them from your room?
Of course. The two girls went into Asia's room, and Armanush called her father in San Francisco.
Okay.
Asia watched Armanush's face as she made the call and saw the terrible sadness that fell across it as she learned what had happened.
I understand. Okay. Love you.
Then she put the phone down.
It's my grandma, she said. I wasn't with that. About coming here, going to where she lived, and now I can't. At that moment, Mustafa and Ruth were somewhere discussing.
the short skirt was no longer talking about her, but Mustafa could still see the edge of her heels sticking out from her seat. And as the announcement came, he looked quickly at the memory he took face ever since it happened.
Rolled across the bed, listening to pop music.
Turn that music down.
I can listen to anything I want as loud as I want.
Why do you wear those short skirts?
Jerk.
And that's my razor blade.
Is it?
You've stolen it to shave your legs, so you can show them off to all the men in the neighborhood.
Why don't you go and busy yourself somewhere else? Masturbate or something.
You have no shame. You dress like a whore and then demand respect.
Why? Are you scared of whores?
Have you been spying on me?
What? No. If you go to prostitutes, I couldn't care less.
If father were here, you wouldn't dare talk like that. Just because his God doesn't mean there are no rules. With father dead, I'm in charge of the family.
You know what your problem is? You're spoiled. A little prince. Well, no one tells me what to do. Precious little phallus.
Say that again.
She escaped the first slap, but that infuriated him more, and the next caught her hard against her cheek. She fell backwards, and then he was on top of her. She tried to stop him, but he held her arm around her back and pushed her down onto the bed. When it ended, he slumped off her, wiping himself, and left.
Mustafa turned to his wife, sitting next to him, looking over the presents she had bought for his family. A cactus bed, a cactus snow globe, a had never told anyone of how one day when she was only 19, he had raped his sister Zaliha, and of how the shame had forced him to live forever away from his homeland and never return. Until now. He squeezed his wife's hand, kissed her on the cheek, and stroked the nape of her neck. What's got into you, sweetie?
Nothing, sweetheart. Nothing.
And the pilot announced their descent into Istanbul.
Once in a land far, far away, there was an old couple who lived with their 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. One daughter was ugly, and the other beautiful. The youngest brother decided to marry the beautiful one, but she did not want to. She washed her silk clothes and went to the water to rinse them. She rinsed and cried. It was cold. Her hands and feet were freezing. She came home and knocked on the door, but it was locked. She knocked on her mother's window, and her mother answered, "I will let you in if you call me mother-in-law." She knocked on her father's window, and he answered, "I will let you in if you call me father-in-law." She knocked on her elder brother's window, and he said, "I will let you in if you call me brother-in-law." She knocked on her sister's window and she said,